Hi, my name is Kevin, and I collect old irons. One of the interesting things about old irons as a hobby is the diverse variety of things that can be had for minimal money. In this video, we will present 10 more or less essential irons for the beginning collector. Most of these will come from the 19th century, and these are by and large readily available in antique shops and on eBay. The goal is to start with a collection of interesting pieces that have good stories. The obvious place to start is a flat iron. Flat irons are very common, and you can buy many flat irons for $10 or so. But we're talking about picking an iron for your collection, and there are lots of flat irons that have rather mundane handles and no markings except perhaps a number, and I think you should hold out for something a little better than that. Let me show you one that I bought at an antique shop my last trip in southern Maine. I paid $8 for this, and I ordinarily wouldn't bother to buy it at all. It's a rather common iron for my particular collection, but we do pass these things to others, and also I'm always looking for an excuse to have the opportunity to talk to a dealer that I haven't talked with before, and $8 is a good expense for that. And this one has a cross-hatched handle, and on the top is a C in a crest. The C means Coalbrookdale Foundry, a foundry that was in business for something like 100 years, making irons like this into the 1950s, out of Pottstown, Pennsylvania. And if you're going to have a Coalbrookdale iron, you might look for the Coalbrookdale Trivet as well. These trivets also very common, and you can probably pick one of these up for $10 or $12 as well. So Coalbrookdale iron and trivet. But again, for the flat irons, there are so many to choose from. That might not be the first one that you find and decide to add to your collection. You might find this one, and this is a very attractive and interesting piece as well. This is from the Ober Manufacturing Company in Chagrin Falls, Ohio, and this has a very attractive, very stylish, in fact even especially stylish for 1912, which is when this was patented. This one also has a trivet. You might not find the two together, but individually you'll find them pretty easily. This is the Ober Chagrin Falls, Ohio trivet, and they liked a square trivet here, and they had some trivets too that had leaves on them. And again, you can probably get each of these in the $10, maybe $15 or so. So, flat irons. A collection of 10 essential irons should have one with a detachable handle. For detachable handles, there are many different kinds and companies, but the most common is a Mrs. Potts. Mrs. Potts has a semicircular handle on the top, and if you're going to buy a Mrs. Potts, make sure the handle is in good condition, is not cracked, and handle comes off like this, and make sure that there's good markings on the top. Some have markings, some don't. There are many different companies that made these things. This particular one is Enterprise from Philadelphia, USA, and again, there are stands that might have the same company markings as the iron. This again is an Enterprise stand, but since we have a Mrs. Potts style iron, you might look for the Mrs. Potts stand. And these irons would be $10, $20 a piece, maybe the stand another $10 or $12. With those done, you might seek out a Mrs. Potts card. These trade cards very popular in the 1870s, 1880s, and these can be had on eBay in good condition for $10 and maybe a couple $3 in postage. So, iron, stand, and a card make for a very interesting story, and you can probably seek out all three in something like 30 some odd dollars. And how about a little more unusual but still quite common single piece iron? This is a hat iron. Hat irons had rounded fronts. A small hat iron. It also has a cross-hatched bottom as a polishing iron. A polishing iron had more weight per area to get the brims of hats and collars and so forth. This iron is quite common. You could, I think, easily find for $20, $25. This is the most common of many varieties. This one is marked M. Mahoney, Troy, New York. The Mahoney company made a lot of polishing irons in various shapes, and I'll show a couple more because you just might be lucky and find one of these first. This one has a rounded bottom. This one has a double bottom called the McCoy patent, and these might be a little more, you know, $35, $45 perhaps. And your beginning small collection should have a Tailor iron. These were used by the professionals commercially. And the Tailor irons were also known as goose irons. Plural for goose back then was gooses in this context. They are long and narrow and heavy, and they're quite common. You see them all over the place in antique shops, and probably see them so in such numbers because they don't sell very readily. Consequently, they're low prices. I usually see these Tailor irons for $1 a pound. So a 20-pound Tailor iron might cost $20, $22. This particular one has good markings. New England Butt Company, Providence, Rhode Island. The 21 here would mean 21 pounds. And these Tailor irons used every imaginable technology that you can think of. Natural gas, gasoline, coal, etc. Very interesting group in my experience, and one of my favorite groups. And just to show something else you might find instead and opt for as your example, or at least your first example of the Tailor irons. This is an electric Tailor iron. This is from the Pacific Electric Heating Company in Ontario, California. Quite heavy, has the original trivet as well, and this iron has patent dates of 1905 to 1908. Something like this might cost a little more, $50, $70 or so. And you'd have to have an iron powered by coal. These irons were very common in the late 1880s. This particular one has a chimney to it, and this one also has a handle that comes off with the fluting attachment on the other side, so you can ruffle certain kinds of clothing and so forth. This one has on the handle patents from 1885 and 1888. And it also has this interesting trivet, and you don't see too many of these, and they're only associated with this particular manufacturer, the Peace Company. And the reason for the base here is that we could set this down like this, and we could use this as a mini stove to heat some coffee or tea, or maybe use to heat the bedroom in the evening. Or you can put it on the other side, taking the handle off, come on, and do some fluting. These irons, maybe without the fluting attachment, can be found for $30, $40. With the fluting attachment, maybe $50. You'd have to look some to find the stand, and that might be another $15, $20. So our collection of 10 essential irons should include an iron powered by gasoline. Gasoline, you might think that's rather extraordinary and unusual, but these were all over the place once upon a time. 1900s to, well, these things were still being sold in the 1960s. This is a Coleman iron, usually a light blue color. They come in other colors as well. There are many other companies, not quite the colors, but tanks in other places as well. Front, handle, above the top. All of these are fairly common. You might even find them in a tattered old box with some of the original papers and advertising for $20 or $30. Oftentimes it'll include the original pump as well, and perhaps the base too. But you might keep an eye out for something a little earlier. Let me show you this one here. This is the Imperial gasoline iron. These things were made from 1901 to 1911, probably some years afterwards as well. You can take the top off so that you can clean the inside. You can even take this out if you like, and there is a attached pump to the gas tank in this particular one. These maybe can be found for $40 or $50 more or less. Do make sure all the parts are there. The wooden knob on the back sometimes is broken off. And there also were a wide variety of different irons from the 1900s into the 1950s powered by natural gas. And the way you tell the natural gas irons from the liquid fuel irons, the gasoline irons have tanks, the natural gas irons have a nozzle, and then the line from the propane tank would attach to this. This particular one is from the Strauss company. There were some other associated companies all out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. This one reads the Gun Quality Gas Iron Company. They all have very similar stands. This particular one is called the I Want You, neat little trade name, Comfort Iron. Comfort because they were a whole lot more comfortable than using the stove. And here is probably one of the associated companies, also a I Want You double point comfort iron. Also with a nice here double point stand, which includes, as does this one, a nice little cutout version of the iron itself. Now the stands oftentimes got separated with use. You might find the two together, $35, $45. More typically, you find these individually, and you might find one of these for $20, $30, and then you can find the stands, and these stands in particular, quite abundant. You'd find one on eBay in no time at all, and not pay very much for it. When I started collecting irons, it took me some while before I realized that these things, which didn't look anything like an iron to me, were used in pressing ruffles in the cloth, and they do constitute themselves as old irons. And once I became familiar with the diversity here, this became my favorite group. This is the most common of the hand fluters. This is the Geneva fluter, made in Geneva, Illinois. The base, fairly heavy iron base here. It says heat this. You'd heat this on the stove. You might then take a stove listener and take it to some other room, nice and hot, and you could then start ironing those ruffles. We have in a past video actually shown how the fluter irons would be operated. The top and bottom plates are made of zinc. Everything else is of iron. The zinc would not oxidize, and so consequently would not perhaps put some rust stains into your ruffles. These were made from the 1860s to the 1920s. Huge numbers. They're quite common. You can probably find these top and bottom for $25, $35 would be a good price. You would want to make sure that there's no cracks in the zinc plates, top and bottom. And again, while you're looking for these, you might very well find something more unusual. And if it's only a marginally higher price, you should buy that baby. And you should also be able to recognize a machine fluter. Machine fluters, again, many types, but the most common is the crown fluter. This one has patent dates 1875 to 1880, but these were still advertised, the crown fluter here, in Sears catalogs into the early 1900s. Again, very common. The example that I have happens to have been subsequently turned into a lamp, but that doesn't prevent me from showing it off. And here I have an iron that's doing double duty. It's being an iron and being a lamp here in our living room as well. So you would put metal slugs into here. You usually don't see the slugs with the iron, and you'd put your ruffles through here and turn the crank. These crown fluters and associated irons made by the American Machine Company in Philadelphia, again 1870s and for the rest of that century, very common, and you can probably get a fairly good example for $50 or so, maybe more so. And if you want hold out to find something that has some of the original markings or the original decal. The American Machine Company, as I said, made a wide range of machine fluters, 6 or 8 or more brands, and each brand had an associated trade card. So for the crown iron that we just saw, here's a trade card. If you get an iron, keep an eye out for the trade cards on eBay. You can probably get the appropriate trade card for $10, $15 or so, keeping in mind that there's always somebody out there trying to sell the same card for $50 or $80, and you just need to learn to ignore those. And so that makes 9 essential irons. So one more. I don't have any particular group that I think we necessarily have to have. Let's just pick something that, I don't know, just popped in front of us while we were looking for the 9 that we've seen already. And for that, there are so many different possibilities. But I thought maybe a typical example of the kind of typically unusual things that you might find for a relatively low price would be this iron. This is a Hewitt rotating iron. I'm ironing. The bottom side is now cooling down, so I just simply rotate to a new face and I can keep on ironing. Has a little bit of a polishing face on the bottom as well. And I could probably find this, if I was lucky, for $50, $70, something like that. And if I was particularly lucky, I might find it with the original additional plate. Let me put this on here. Unscrew, screw back on. This is a plate that I can attach to the bottom of my iron, and with the bottom plate as well, I can do fluting with it. And again, these parts are a little bit more unusual, and altogether this would cost a little bit more money, but this is the kind of thing that you just might happen to see, and I'd like you to be able to recognize that this would be a good deal, good opportunity, if indeed you're looking for more old irons. Now some general advice. The world is full of these things, but you can't buy them all. Figure out how much space you have to dedicate to this hobby, and then be selective as you hunt for the right pieces that will fill that space. You can always later on expand to a garage or a new finished section of the basement or something like that, but maybe the original space is what you should be using, and as you have that filled, then you look for some better pieces, that taking the older pieces and selling them to others who are starting their collections. So don't go too crazy, don't buy too many, listen to your spouse. So where do you find these things? Let's remember that this is a hobby, so the object is to have fun. And I get a lot of fun out of going to antique shops, flea markets, auctions, and hunting for these. Many collectors of old irons are guys, and we are filling out our hunter-gatherer instincts in doing so. When you get a little more sophisticated and looking for rare pieces, you can always look at eBay and Etsy. I find that a little more sterile, but it is a market where you can find stuff. There is a national as well as an international organization. The national organization is the Pressing Iron and Trivet Collectors of America, with many interesting people, a good magazine, web page, and a presence on Facebook. There is a national meeting in late summer, and there are regional meetings as well. And there's an abundance of iron collectors everywhere, in every state, around the world, many interesting people. So, welcome to our crowd. Check the link in our description, and there are other videos to watch as well. Thank you.